Jiro is a middle-aged assassin skilled in the art of poison, but he has one major problem. All his friends have gotten married, while he still can't even get himself a girlfriend, so he needs to do something to fix that before he ends up dying alone. On one of Jiro's missions, he is there to take out a Yakuza president, and the president in question is currently speedrunning lung cancer while sitting on several nearly naked men as furniture, which seems pretty gay if you ask me. This is a celebration to commemorate their group's most recent success, so the president orders wine for everyone there. But first, to make sure it isn't poisoned, he orders his most trusted poison taster to try the wine. The taster takes a swig, and after confirming that the wine has no negative effects, the president takes a sip. However, moments later, the president spits out a mouthful of blood because the wine was indeed poisoned, and the one responsible for it was Jiro. He had slipped the poison into the president's wine while disguised as a waiter, and his job was done. He slipped out into the crowd as though nothing had happened. This is all in a day's work for him, but on the way back, he notices a pretty girl flirting with a dude in a car, and he's honestly a little jealous. So much so that he gets distracted and walks right into a lamp pole. A little while later, he finally returns to base, and there, he debriefs his sister on how the mission went. She is glad to hear that it was a success, but she can't help but wonder how he managed to slip that poison into the president's glass without the poison taster finding it. He explains that he didn't slip it past the taster at all, he just thought ahead and made the taster immune to that particular poison. Over the past 3 months, he had been adding tiny amounts of the poison to the taster's food since he was a lot easier to get to than the boss. Once his body had built up sufficient resistance to the toxin, he wouldn't be able to tell if the wine was poisoned or not, giving the president the go-ahead to drink the tainted wine. His sister is impressed that he could think of such an ingenious plan, but she's surprised he went through with it since it sounds like it was a massive pain in the butt. He agrees that it was annoying to have to do, but it was the best option because no one would expect an assassin to pull off such a convoluted scheme. His sister is glad he managed to come out of it all in one piece, but she actually has something else she wanted to discuss, so she asks Jiro if he has put any thought into getting married yet. Jiro spits up his snack when he hears her mention marriage because it's a bit of a sore topic for him. After all, there's no way someone like him could ever hold down a normal relationship, especially not in his line of work. His sister asks him to reconsider, but Jiro says there's nothing to think about because their grandma already wants to make one of them the new head of the Poison Clan, and when he tried to turn her down because he's single, his grandma matched him up with a total stranger from a branch family and nearly forced him to get married right then. He was able to get out of it, but that's why he isn't in a rush to get married anytime soon, and he is perfectly content with the lineage of the Poison Clan ending with him as the last Poison Master. Later that night, Jiro goes out to meet with one of his old friends, the Bug Master, and the two sit down to have a drink together. The Bug Master mentions that he heard that the Needle Master has 3 kids now, and Jiro is happy for the Needle Master, but he's never going to be able to share that experience since he's going to spend the rest of his life single. But at least he's still got the Bug Master with him so they can be single together. However, the Bug Master actually has something he has been meaning to tell Jiro. He informs Jiro that he is actually thinking of getting married soon, and hearing that catches Jiro off guard. The Bug Master then goes on to explain that he recently met a nice girl, and she accepts him for who he is, so he really feels like he could spend the rest of his life with her. Jiro can't believe the guy whose specialty is bugs managed to get a nice partner before him, but all the same, he's happy for his friend and congratulates him. The Bug Master assures Jiro that him getting married isn't going to change the fact that they are best friends, and Jiro is glad to hear that. But he'd be lying if he said he wasn't at least a little jealous because he can't even begin to imagine himself finding the perfect wife. Later on, Jiro is invited to Gold's base because he would like to ask him for a favor. Jiro's motto is that he offers cleaning services for a reasonable price, but only if the target is evil, which is why Gold has brought him there today. As a bonus, he offers to let Garo have some fun with his secretaries before he gets to work, but Garo turns him down because there's no way he could do something like that. He says he just wants to get this over with as soon as possible, so Gold goes ahead and introduces Jiro to the target, Mei Kinosaki, a marriage con artist who has been swindling Gold's men out of their hard-earned money by tricking them into falling in love with her. That's enough to meet Jiro's criteria, so he gets to work and injects her with a nerve toxin. He then tells her that over the next few minutes, every nerve in her body is going to feel like it's being torn apart piece by piece, and she's going to be conscious for every minute of that torture. Mei doesn't react to Jiro's statement, and instead nervously tells him that he reminds her of her first love, but Jiro can tell that she's just trying to worm her way out of this by flirting with him, just like she did with the others. Mei admits that she scammed people, but she says she had a really good reason for it because she was trying to earn enough money to pay for her sick brother's hospital bills but she admits that what she did was still wrong. She's just glad that she gets to spend her last moment looking at a face similar to someone she loves. The poison is really starting to take its toll on Mei's body, and it's pretty clear that everything she said was just an attempt to pull at Jiro's heartstrings. But if you're wondering if he's really gullible enough to fall for someone who is literally confirmed to be a love con artist, yes he is. Just then, Jiro receives a call from his sister, and she apologizes for calling him when he's in the middle of work, but she has to move back to the main family branch, so she wanted to let him know before she leaves. This comes as a shock to Jiro, so he asks her what's going on, and his sister explains that their grandma is really serious about wanting an heir, and since Jiro doesn't have a wife and they couldn't convince him to accept the arranged marriage, his sister has to do it instead. Jiro tries to tell her she doesn't have to do this, but his sister doesn't have what it takes to escape the main family, and she knows that if she refuses, then they will likely take away her freedom to use her as a baby-making machine. And if that's the alternative, then she'd rather just submit to their grandma's will and go along with it. Jiro asks Akari what she's going to do about her girlfriend, and she says she has no choice but to break up with her. Jiro tells her not to do it, but she yells back that this is the only way because she doesn't want Jiro to have to sacrifice himself in her place. It's true that Jiro doesn't want to have an arranged marriage, but he doesn't want his sister to have to go through that either, so he comes up with an idea. He walks up to Mei and tells her that if she wants to live, then she has to agree to marry him. At least this way, he'd be choosing someone who he's already attracted to, so he asks her if she's on board. Hearing that, Mei smiles at him with relief, and then she says hell no. Jiro really wasn't expecting that after what Mei said earlier, but she was just trying to get under his skin a little as payback before she dies. After all, why would she want to get married to someone who thinks it's appropriate to propose to someone he was about to kill a moment ago? Jiro realizes that she's right, because he wouldn't agree to a deal like that either, and Mei goes on to say that if he's really serious about finding a wife, then he needs to be honest with himself about how he feels, otherwise, he'll never find anyone. Just then, Gold calls Garo over the comms system and asks him if he can hurry this up a little because he wants to see him kill Mei already. However, Garo is deep in thought right now. He has a rule of only killing evil people who deserve to die, not because he cares about justice or anything, but rather to make it easier for him to sleep at night. That said, he still kills people for a living, and he has been telling himself that he deserves to be alone for the rest of his life. But even someone like him thinks about falling in love and living a happy life sometimes. It's all he has been thinking about lately, but he knows he'll never meet someone like that because he's got no social skills. He never went to regular school, never made friends, and as a poison master, he barely ever meets new people unless they are assassins just like him. Mei tells him that he just needs to put himself out there and meet all sorts of people, because eventually, someone is bound to like him, though it will probably take a lot of effort on his part. But that aside, she tells him to hurry up and kill her. After all, she deserves it after what she caused her brother to go through. Just then, Gold and his crew show up in the chamber, and he tells Jiro to get on with it because he has already gotten more than enough dating advice from Mei. However, Jiro flatly says no because he needs Mei alive. He's not going to ask her to marry him, but he believes that only someone with matchmaking skills like her would be able to help him find a partner, so he offers to hire her to help him find a wife. Mei wasn't expecting Jiro to say that, and this is by far the strangest job she has ever been offered, but she's happy to agree to it. Just then, Gold and his crew all raise their guns, and Gold tells Jiro that he's not going to make it out of here after betraying him like this. Jiro doesn't count this as a betrayal, because his rule is that he only kills human scum, and Mei doesn't seem bad enough to deserve death. But Gold, on the other hand, is a different story. His organization makes money by taking jobs from ordinary people and then using the information gathered on those people to blackmail them and extort money. There's no telling how many lives his business has ruined, and that sounds pretty scummy to him, so it looks like he's got a new target. Jiro takes his syringe out and injects himself with a special poison, and as the group fires their guns at him, he vanishes right before their eyes along with Mei, before reappearing above them on the ceiling with a few vials of poison in hand. A few moments later, Jiro injects Mei with the antidote for the poison he gave her earlier, while all the gang members are either unconscious or convulsing, but despite how it looks, they aren't going to die. He just used his 300-year torment poison, so they'll experience unimaginable pain for a while, but it'll wear off eventually. In the meantime, he calls his sister and tells her that she doesn't have to go along with their grandma's demands. She tries to argue with him because she has already made her decision, but he cuts her off and explains that he just came to realize that having a genuine relationship is one of the greatest miracles out there, and he doesn't want her to ruin her life for his sake, so he promises that he will get married and succeed the Poison Clan in her place. After that, Jiro prepares to carry Mei home so she can start giving him proper dating advice, but he's not sure how to handle carrying her back because he's never had to touch a girl unless it was part of his job before. To that, Mei tells him there's no need to worry because she's actually a guy, and Jiro can't believe what he just heard. Mei has been a guy all along, and the only reason he was dressed as a girl is because his last con target was a man, so he needed to make it work somehow. Though he usually goes after female scam targets, so this was a rare occasion. That aside, he wants to get right to work helping Jiro, so he signs him up for a matchmaking event later that day, and he has a foolproof plan to help Jiro make some progress. Mei goes to the event dressed as a girl and charms all the men present to reduce Jiro's competition, and while he's doing that, it'll be up to Jiro to make his move. Jiro sits down across from one of the ladies at the event, and after she introduces herself, Jiro prepares to play his trump card. He tells her he makes over 100 million a year. That didn't go very well for him since the girl ignored him after that, and Mei yells at him, asking why he'd do something so crass. But Jiro really thought it was going to work. He read on a blog that women like men who make a lot of money, but while that may be true to some extent, Mei tells him he shouldn't be starting conversations like that because it makes him seem like a total jerk. He advises Jiro to at least look into the girl's eyes and smile before saying anything, and Jiro takes the advice to heart, but unfortunately, he looks really creepy when he smiles. The matchmaking event was a total bust, but Mei tells Jiro not to give up yet because the next plan is to use dating apps. Later that day, Mei manages to get a match for Jiro, and the date is at a local coffee shop. But Jiro is having a hard time because the girl ordered desserts for both of them. And all his Poison Master training makes it really difficult for him to eat something that he didn't make himself. And as you'd expect, the girl got weirded out by his behavior and left midway through the date. After a few more failed attempts, Mei says goodbye to Jiro for today and tells him they'll meet back up tomorrow to continue. However, just as she turns the corner, a car comes speeding down the street, and a man leans out and grabs Mei. The man is the older brother of Gold, and he demands to know what Mei did to him. Because before, Gold always used to talk about conquering the criminal underworld, but now he says he wants to just move back to his hometown and start a quiet cleaning company because crime isn't worth it. He knows Mei must have had something to do with it, so he's going to torture him until he finds out what happened. However, just then, the group notices a man standing in the middle of the street ahead of them, and it's Jiro. They try to run him over, but Jiro leaps over the car, and at the same time, he pours a highly corrosive cleaning agent he made down the middle of the car, splitting it in two. He then runs up to it from behind. And just before the car goes over the bridge, he grabs Mei and jumps away to safety. And as for Gold's brother, after what just happened, the only thought going through his mind is, you know what, maybe being a criminal isn't worth it after all. The next day, Kinosaki tells Jiro to meet him at an art gallery, and he doesn't understand why at first, but Kinosaki explains that even if he were to get a date with a girl, he'd mess it up in no time, so this is a practice date so that he can work on his mannerisms. As the day goes on, Jiro and Kinosaki go around the gallery together, and Kinosaki is acting natural, but Jiro is really stiff with his responses, so Kinosaki tells him to just loosen up a little because this isn't an interview. However, Jiro doesn't know how to loosen up, so he runs off and starts searching through the internet for pickup lines, but Kinosaki tells him he should just speak normally, which is a lot easier said than done for him. While they continue walking through the gallery, Jiro eventually notices a DIY candy kit on display, and this isn't just any candy kit either, this is the first one that was ever made 40 years ago. Jiro is really into candy kits, and even though this one is a collector's item that could easily cost 30 million, he'd be willing to pay 5 times that to get his hands on it. Kinosaki can't believe a candy kit could be so expensive, but seeing Jiro get excited about something is a nice change from his usual awkward self. And now that he has had a chance to break the tension by talking about something familiar to him, he's a lot more laid back and can actually make jokes about the art instead of awkwardly spouting pickup lines, so that's a step in the right direction. Jiro is grateful that Kinosaki is giving him a date rehearsal, but he's still not sure how a guy like him is supposed to find his charm, but just as he says this, Kinosaki points his attention toward a guy sitting on the first floor of the gallery. At first glance, the dude looks like an absolute weirdo, crouched down by an exhibit and muttering to himself, but he actually has a loving wife and adoring fans who flock to him the second they realize who he is. That's because he is one of the most famous artists of this generation, and the same rule applies to other talents, because people are inclined to like those who are skilled at something they enjoy or need. It may seem shallow to say you like someone for what they can do, but that is also part of your charm, the same as your looks or your personality, so he needs to take advantage of everything he has. Jiro understands what he's saying, but he doesn't think he has any talents that could be used as part of his charm. However, Kinosaki tells him that he does. After all, he was able to take out an entire room of bad guys all on his own with his poison master skills, and there's no way something as amazing as that won't be considered charming. Kinosaki asks him to lean in close and tells him all he needs to do is start helping people. But having someone whisper in his ear is a new experience, so Jiro is startled and jumps back in shock. Kinosaki goes on to explain that if he does stuff like protect high-profile clients and rescue hostages, preferably with ladies around to witness it, before he knows it, at least one person is going to fall for him. And it shouldn't be too hard for him since he already accepts pretty much any job out there as long as it's not outright evil. Jiro doesn't really think this is going to work because he's a poison master who assassinates people, but Kinosaki reminds him that there are no rules, stating that Jiro can't save people too. Even so, Jiro says it would feel like he was taking advantage of the girl if he acted like himself, just to get her to like him. But Kinosaki says it doesn't really matter how you meet someone, whether you bump into them naturally or stalk them for 3 months beforehand. As long as the two of you genuinely like each other, it will work out. Take Shiratori for example. He has a lot of young girls fawning over him because of his work, but he still chooses his wife above all else. So he grabs her hand and starts running out of the gallery to get away from the crowd. It's a touching display of how much they both care for each other. But Kinosaki was actually hoping to get an autograph from Shiratori as well, so he chases after him. Later that night at the cruise gallery, one of the paintings has been stolen, and this looks like the work of none other than the famous art thief, Himekawa. The guard is furious because the captain of the ship put a lot of effort into gathering these art pieces in many not-so-legal ways, and he won't stand for anyone stealing from the collection that he rightfully stole. They begin searching for any signs of a getaway boat nearby, but they haven't found anything on the radar, so they assume she must still be on the ship somewhere. However, Himekawa has already made her escape via a shark, and she's heading straight for land as they speak. Meanwhile, the captain is informed that one of his paintings has been stolen, but he doesn't seem too bothered by it because he thinks it's a small price to pay to finally get rid of an annoying pest. As Himekawa makes it to the shore, she's about to meet up with her team so they can all make their escape, but all of a sudden, the group gets engulfed by a vortex of water because the captain has already hired someone to take care of Himekawa. Meanwhile, back on the ship, Kinosaki reiterates the plan to get Jiro a girlfriend by having him save people, and Jiro understands most of it, but he has no idea how he's supposed to find rescue jobs when all he has ever done are assassinations. Kinosaki takes out his phone and shows him a website called DarkNav, and it's basically a dark web job site where all sorts of criminal and otherwise shady jobs are posted for anyone to accept. It should be really easy for Jiro to find a rescue job with this, and frankly, he's surprised that Jiro has never heard of it before since pretty much everyone in this line of work uses it nowadays. Jiro says all his jobs usually go through his family's broker, so he has never had to search like this before. Jiro takes a look at the job board, but he's not very impressed by what he sees since pretty much all the jobs there are either scam or smuggling related. But that's just because he's on Kinosaki's account right now, and deception is his area of expertise. After searching a little more, Jiro eventually comes across a post from the captain of the ship who has taken Himekawa hostage, and he is demanding that Himekawa's group hand over all the art they've stolen if they want to get her back unharmed. The criminal underworld knows Himekawa as a skilled art thief, but the truth is that she only targets malicious collectors who steal art from others, specifically so she can return it to its rightful owner. That's why Himekawa's crew is trying to hire someone to infiltrate the captain's base and rescue her, but unfortunately, it looks like Jiro and Kinosaki are the only ones who showed up. The group expected as much since they don't have enough money to offer a decent reward, and no rational assassin is going to accept such a risky job when the pay is so low. Fortunately for them, Jiro isn't in it for the money, so he agrees to take on the job. He introduces himself as a master of the Poison Clan, and as soon as the group hears that, they are terrified because they never expected to run into a poison master here. Normally, they'd have to sell all their organs just to cover the broker fee for someone as skilled as him, but if he's really willing to help them, then they aren't going to say no. However, before Jiro gets to work, he has a very important question, so he asks the group if Himekawa is single. Meanwhile, Himekawa is currently being held in the captain's private quarters, and the captain is talking about how beautiful he thinks she is, so he says he will spare her life if she agrees to become a part of his collection, but Himekawa flat out refuses. She came here to steal that painting back because the husband of the woman in the painting said it was the last thing he and his daughter had to remember his late wife by, so they were absolutely devastated when it was stolen. That's why Himekawa agreed to steal it back, and she refuses to give up until she has returned it to its rightful owners, but the captain has no intention of letting her do that, so he orders his mercenary to torture Himekawa until her resolve has been broken. Meanwhile, Jiro and Kinosaki are on their way to save Himekawa, and while they are running, Kinosaki tells Jiro that asking a question like that was really risky. It was fortunate that the guys just thought it was code for the mission, but if they knew he was just doing this to try and get Himekawa to fall for him, it would ruin the entire plan if she found out. Eventually, they arrive at the location where Himekawa's GPS says she should be, but the second Kinosaki gets to the top of the stairs, he gets 2 shotgun barrels pointed at him by the guards. Fortunately, before he can be shot, Jiro manages to take the guards out with a split kick, all while aura farming with his hands in his pockets. He then turns to ask Kinosaki if he's alright, and he says he's fine, but he's starting to think he should sit this one out because he's not much of a fighting type. However, Jiro says he needs Kinosaki to come with him because he has never met this girl before, and he's worried that he will screw it up if he's alone. Back in the captain's quarters, Himekawa has been getting waterboarded for the past 5 minutes, but the captain tells Ushio to stop for now because he just got word that there are 2 intruders nearby. So he wants Ushio to go deal with them, and while he's gone, the captain plans to try out some more creative torture methods on Himekawa. As Jiro and Kinosaki continue making their way to Himekawa, Kinosaki asks Jiro what he intends to say when he finally finds her, and while taking out a group of guards, Jiro responds with, "Hello, will you please marry me?" Kinosaki immediately tells him that's a terrible idea, because Himekawa is probably terrified right now, and the last thing she wants to hear is the guy who saved her proposing on the spot. Meanwhile, back on Himekawa's end, the captain points a gun at her head, and she thinks he's about to shoot her, but it's actually worse than that, because he points his gun at the painting and threatens to shoot it if Himekawa doesn't submit to him. Himekawa made a promise to return that painting in one piece, and she can't do that if the captain destroys it, so she's about to relent and agree to do whatever the captain wants. But just then, his arm is blown clean off, and he then sees a burning figure come out of the painting and engulf his entire body in flames, but that part is just a hallucination caused by a dose of Jiro's poison, and the captain is going to be out for quite a while. Jiro walks up to Himekawa and recites his practiced line, introducing himself as the Poison Master and telling her that she's safe now because he came to rescue her. Himekawa is relieved that someone came to save her, but she knows her group doesn't have the kind of money necessary to hire a Poison Master, so she's worried that her friends might have sold their organs to pay for it. Meanwhile, Jiro is freaking out because while he may have made a good introduction, he didn't think of what he was going to say afterward, so he doesn't know what to do now. Kinosaki walks up and starts untying Himekawa before Jiro says anything to mess this up, but just then, Ushio grabs Himekawa and drags her away. Jiro can tell that Ushio is going to be a tough opponent for him to beat, so he injects himself and charges at her with a lethal dose of poison, but before he can make contact, Ushio gets away with his sudden blast of water. Jiro grabs Himekawa and tosses her over to Kinosaki so he can keep her safe in the meantime, while he goes to deal with Ushio. Ushio attempts to crush Jiro by filling her arm with water to maximize impact, and the strike creates a hole in the ground, but Jiro manages to block most of the damage. Ushio then charges at Jiro again, but instead of attacking, she hands him a business card and introduces herself as a water master. She has just realized that Jiro is a poison master, and she would rather not fight another master because the losses incurred in trying to beat him would be too great. So she asks if he would be willing to walk away if she offers to pay 10 times what Himekawa's crew paid. Meanwhile, on the upper floor, Kinosaki notices the syringe the hero used still has some liquid in it, and he is considering using it on himself so he can help Jiro fight. But Jiro yells at him not to touch it because it's not an enhancement drug, it's deadly poison. Each assassin family has a genetic trait that they pass down from generation to generation, and in Jiro's family, it's the ability to greatly increase their physical attributes when they have deadly poison flowing through their veins. Genetic traits like that are also the reason Ushio is able to control water so freely in combat. Regarding the deal she offered a moment ago, Jiro turns her down, and she is disappointed to hear that because she knows fighting him is going to be expensive, but she has no choice. She launches a water blast at him, but Jiro manages to dodge because his abilities grow stronger the closer he is to death, though taking one of those blasts head-on would be a death sentence. So he needs to avoid getting hit. Ushio doesn't understand why Jiro is putting so much effort into this mission when he has nothing to gain from it, and she starts to wonder if Jiro and Himekawa might be romantically involved in some way, but Jiro doesn't respond. He manages to use a needle to scratch Ushio's suit, and at first she isn't too concerned about it, but then the scratch bursts into flames because the needle was laced with a highly potent acid. Jiro then takes advantage of the opportunity to strike Ushio multiple times in the faceplate until it cracks, and as he does this, he explains that while Himekawa may be a stranger to him right now, She might become someone special to him in the future, so he's going to do everything he can to save her. Jiro's life has been anything but normal in terms of socialization, but as part of his training, he was taught about the various ways ordinary people live their lives through a series of hidden cameras placed in the rooms of several families all across Japan. This massive invasion of privacy was done so he would understand that ordinary people live meaningless, trivial lives devoid of any higher purpose, so he wouldn't hesitate when it came time to kill them. However, that trivial life of sitting down for breakfast with a family that cares about you is exactly what Jiro wants, and he will do anything to get it, even if it's the death of him. Ushio laughs in Jiro's face and tells him that if the future head of the Poison Clan is saying something so idiotic, then the clan is never going to last. And to ensure Jiro's defeat, Ushio decides to use her trump card, her modified Bloodline Plus, Hell's Lashes. It allows her to create a huge torrent of water that acts as razor-sharp whips, and a single lash from one of these is enough to rip through flesh and bone, so Jiro is once again on the back foot of the fight. Just to tick Jiro off, she intentionally targets Himekawa and Kinosaki mid-fight, causing Kinosaki to suffer a slash on his back when he pushes Himekawa out of the way. Ushio then sarcastically apologizes to Jiro for hurting an innocent bystander and says she will be sure to compensate him for the damages, but that's only if he can survive. Meanwhile, up top, Himekawa rushes over to check on Kinosaki, and seeing the state he's in, she asks why he and Jiro are going to such great lengths for her sake. Kinosaki tells her that for one, it is their job to save her, but to Jiro, this is much more important than she could ever imagine, which is why he is trying so hard to keep her safe. Himekawa asks why Jiro would go so far for her, but Kinosaki doesn't answer that question and instead tells Himekawa to get out of here while she still has the chance because Ushio might target her again if she gets the chance. However, Himekawa refuses to abandon the people who came to save her life, so she asks Kinosaki if there's anything she can do to help, and just then, the two of them happen to notice Jiro's remaining poison in the needle. Jiro gets stronger the more poison there is in his system, so normally, he'd be able to win this fight easily by simply injecting himself with more, but the entire supply of needles he keeps on him was crushed when Ushio slammed him through the ground. With the limited amount he already injected himself with, he's not fast enough to get close to Ushio without getting slashed to pieces. He still has his own modified Bloodline trump card, but from a young age, he was taught that he should be very careful about using his modified Bloodline in battle because a trump card only works when no one knows what it does other than you. For that reason, he was told that if he was ever in a fight against another master, and he is forced to use his trump card, then he needs to kill that master no matter what. Ushio was likely taught the same thing, so she is definitely going to kill Jiro the second she gets the chance, and that doesn't leave him with many options other than to activate his own trump card. But fortunately for Jiro, just then, Himekawa jumped down from the upper floor and landed right on top of him with a special package. Jiro immediately starts freaking out because he has never been in such close contact with a girl before, so he asks her what she's doing. And Himekawa explains that she couldn't just throw this down because Ushio would have destroyed it the second she realized what it was. Jiro still doesn't understand why she chose to come back when she's Ushio's target, but while Himekawa does appreciate Jiro trying to save her, she's not the type to just stand idly by while someone else risks their life for her sake. As expected, Ushio immediately grabs Himekawa and mocks her for doing something as dumb as coming back when she can't fight, but what she failed to realize was that Himekawa was just a distraction to buy Jiro enough time to use his remaining poison. Ushio panics the second she sees the syringe in Jiro's hand and orders him to drop it if he doesn't want her to pop Himekawa's head right now. But Jiro has already completely emptied the syringe, and now that he has a full dose of poison in his system, he is much faster than he was before. So fast, in fact, that he easily perception blitzes Ushio, and before she knows it, he has already stabbed her neck with a tiny dose of that same poison. For him, it works as an enhancer, but for someone without poison resistance like Ushio, it causes her body and organs to go into immediate shutdown, so she loses control of her powers and her suit explodes shortly thereafter. After that, Jiro picks the now unconscious Himekawa up to carry her to safety, but he then realizes that his hand is touching her chest, so he starts freaking out again and asks Kinosaki what he should do. Meanwhile, Ushio is currently in the middle of a torturous hallucination, where she feels like her body is actively being burnt to ash, but eventually, Jiro administers an antidote to snap her out of it. Not only that, he recalls reading that the Water Clan bloodline has a hereditary condition where they are allergic to regular air, which is why they wear suits like these and cover most of their body in water all the time. So since he broke her suit, Jiro made her a cream to help manage her allergic reactions until she can get a new suit made. Ushio doesn't understand why Jiro would do all this and asks if this is his way of showing pity, but Jiro says he is simply putting her in her place. Because now that he has beaten her and treated her, she will know better than to mess with him later. After all, it wouldn't be worth the investment, and Yushio has nothing to say to that. Next, Jiro turns to deal with the captain, and the captain is absolutely terrified because he doesn't want to suffer another dose of torturous poison, so he apologizes and says he will never do it again. And Kinosaki tells him that his legally acquired art collection is fine the way it is, so he should just stick to that and stop stealing art from innocent people. Otherwise, there will be severe consequences. Ushio can't believe Jiro really intends to let the captain go with the equivalent of a slap on the wrist instead of killing him after everything that has happened. But Jiro explains that if the captain ever does go back to stealing art, then he's going to be hit with Jiro's 1,000-year torment poison, and that is arguably a fate worse than death, so he should be smart enough to stay out of trouble. He asks Himekawa if she's okay with it, and she says there's no problem because she doesn't intend to let herself get caught ever again. And on that note, she asks Jiro and Kinosaki if they'd like a ride back to the mainland. They both agree, but they later find out that the ride Himekawa was talking about was her pet shark, and being forced to hang onto a shark's fin for dear life in the middle of the ocean isn't very fun. Sometime later, Himekawa manages to successfully return the painting to its rightful owners, and the little girl is overjoyed to have her mother's painting back. The rest of Himekawa's team is also extremely happy to see the painting reunited with its rightful owners, but while they are all cheering, Jiro stands off to the side because he'd rather not draw too much attention to himself. Aja puts the painting back up in its spot, and her father explains that his wife passed away in a traffic accident a few years after Aja was born, so this is all they have left of her. They could have sold the painting to earn enough money to live in a nicer house and live a carefree life, but to them, it holds too much sentimental value for them to just give it up. Just then, Himekawa calls Jiro by name and tells him to get on camera because Aja would like to thank him personally. Jiro tries to turn her down since he thinks it would be awkward, but Kinosaki tells him to just go with it since he deserves a little praise after everything he's done. Jiro steps up and Aja tells him she's really grateful that he saved her mom's painting, and Himekawa also thanks him as well, because when she heard he was a master, she thought he was going to be one of those cold-hearted people who couldn't spare a second thought for people or things they view as beneath them, but she has realized that Jiro is different from the rest. And while everyone is thanking Jiro anyway, Kinosaki adds her gratitude as well because it's all thanks to Jiro agreeing to pay for her brother's medical bills that he's recovering so well. Jiro has never had this many people thank him all at once, and it's a little overwhelming. So he's about to step out to take a break, but before he does, Himekawa gets his attention and says she actually wants to talk about Jiro's reward before he leaves. Even if they all sold their organs, it wouldn't be enough to cover what Jiro did for them, and they don't have the money to pay him. So Himekawa offers to do anything he wants in order to repay him, and Jiro really wasn't prepared for that kind of offer. Kinosaki ends up setting Jiro up on a date with Himekawa under the guise of a celebration for the mission's success, and it's the perfect setup because after Jiro saved her, Himekawa's attraction towards him must be through the roof, so this is the perfect time for him to tell her how he feels. But unfortunately, Jiro can barely string 2 sentences together right now because he's so nervous about being out on a date. Kinosaki is watching from a distance, but this is exactly why Kinosaki gave him all those conversation lessons. One such lesson is that when you've got nothing to say, a good conversation starter is to compliment something she's wearing, and right now, Himekawa is wearing a bunch of interesting things Jiro could compliment, so this shouldn't be hard for him. Jiro remembers Kinosaki's lessons and zeroes in on the necklace Himekawa is wearing, but his compliments need a little work because the first thing he says is that the necklace looks old and worn out. That is a terrible way to start a conversation since it could offend Himekawa if the necklace is important to her. But fortunately, it was just a random trinket she got at a flea market, so she doesn't really mind. There are many ways he could continue the conversation from here, but Jiro can't think of a single thing to say, and most people would have gotten bored or tagged Jiro as a weirdo by now. But Himekawa is really laid back, so it doesn't really bother her. Jiro may be fine for now, but it's only a matter of time before he messes it up, so Kinosaki decides to give him a helping hand and connects to the monitor behind Himekawa to display helpful messages to Jiro. The manager of the restaurant comes over and tries to tell her to stop since the monitor isn't for customers to use, but Kinosaki puts on her puppy dog eyes, and the manager is instantly charmed. Meanwhile, Himekawa notices that Jiro hasn't eaten anything yet, so she asks him if something is wrong, and he explains that as a poison master, he was trained to never eat anything that he didn't personally make on his own, so he always ate alone, and now it's second nature to him. So it's hard to bring himself to take a bite of food at a restaurant. Himekawa kind of understands how Jiro feels since when she was growing up, she was alone most of the time as well. She grew up in an orphanage and was by herself most of the time. But one day, she was adopted by a really rich old man nearing the end of his life. Not because she was special or anything, and not because the old man had any ill intentions either. He just didn't have any children of his own and wanted to leave his fortune to someone. After the man died, Himekawa inherited his vast fortune and family estate. But while she was looking around, she came across a room filled with priceless pieces of art that the old man had stolen from all across the world. She couldn't stand the idea of inheriting something that rightfully belonged to others, so she set to work tracking down all the original owners and returning their paintings to them. However, doing that was really expensive, so she's pretty much broke now. A lot of people mock her for making such an idiotic decision, but Jiro actually thinks Himekawa is the coolest person he has met in a long time. Today was the first time Jiro ever received such genuine thanks because he helped someone. But Himekawa has been doing the same thing for ages, so she must have helped a ton of people. Himekawa is moved to tears because this is the first time someone other than her friends has praised her for her efforts, and Kinosaki thinks this is the perfect timing. So she sends a message telling Gero to ask her out now. After seeing that, Gero gets up and tells Himekawa that he has a favor he would like to ask of her. Himekawa begins blushing because she can see where this is going, but to her surprise, Gero only asks her to become his friend. She laughs a little and says she could have sworn Gero was going to ask her out, and Gero admits that he would like to do that, but right now, he doesn't know anything about Himekawa, and more importantly, Himekawa doesn't know anything about him. He may have made a good first impression, but there are still a lot of dark sides to him that he hasn't addressed yet. So he wants to start out as friends so they can get to know each other properly before he asks her out. Himekawa is open to the idea and agrees to become friends with Gero, even suggesting that they should hang out again sometime soon, but as soon as she's gone. Kinosaki tells Gero that he's got another potential love interest lined up for him, the only daughter of a billionaire in need of a bodyguard. As part of the mission, Gero is required to join the girl at a college party she's attending, but he's absolutely terrible when it comes to parties. However, the girl might actually be even more socially awkward than Gero is because the second two girls try to talk to her. She bursts into tears out of panic. Her name is Shiori, and her uncle is the one who put out an ad for a bodyguard, and he explains that Shiori's father was the one who built this company from the ground up, and after he died, his will stated that Shiori would inherit everything, but Shiori's aunt isn't okay with that, so rumor has it that she hired an assassin who uses strange techniques to take Shiori out. Shiori's uncle hired Jiro because he knew that this wasn't a job any regular bodyguard could handle, and that's a lot coming from a man who's been holding all three of them up through this entire conversation as part of his workout. Shiori thanks Gero for agreeing to protect her, and a little while later, Gero goes undercover at the same school Shiori goes to so he can stay close to her without drawing suspicion. However, Shiori had a request she wanted to make. She told Gero that she wanted to attend a drinking party, and at first, Gero was against the idea because going to a party is way too risky when you're being targeted by an assassin. But Shiori really wants to go because she has never been to social events like these before, and one look at her cute face was all it took for him to cave. So here they are. Shiori gets up to introduce herself to all her new classmates, but after telling them her name, her mind goes completely blank because she has no idea what to say next. She starts going over everything she planned to talk about, but she can't bring herself to say another word, so she eventually just gives up and sits back down. The next person in line to introduce themselves is Gero, so he gets up and prepares to show off his social skills because he practiced specifically for this. He gets up and introduces himself to everyone, and immediately after, he takes 4 mugs of beer and chugs them on the spot before barfing them up as a giant gel worm. This was supposed to be a party trick to make him seem cool, but it just makes everyone else think he's a weirdo. Moving on, there's one more guy who hasn't introduced himself yet, so the host asks him to say a few words to everyone. But Naruko gets up and all he does is say his name and make a hand sign before sitting back down. He may seem a little weird, but he's hot, and he didn't pull a beer slinky out of his throat like Gero did, so all the girls immediately fall for him, and all the guys are starting to get jealous. Gero is amazed by how many ladies Naruko managed to attract when he didn't even do a party trick, and it looks like he is going to have to do some more research on this later. After the party is over, Gero, Shiori, and Kinosaki are walking back home, and Gero turns to talk to Shiori about something, but she gets startled because she's still a little on edge. Gero asks her why she forced herself to attend the party even though she wasn't prepared for it. He can understand her wanting to work on her social skills since she will be taking over the company soon, but there were probably much easier ways to accomplish that instead of going to a party. Hearing Gero say all that, Shiori begins crying again, but not out of sadness. She's just happy that Gero actually cares enough to worry about how she's feeling. She explains that she went to the party because she wanted to be part of the group in her class and get to know them a little since it was her father's last wish. Just before he died, he told Shiori he loved her and told her that she should try going to a party every now and then because life is a lot more fun when you let loose and say the things you want to say. Those were the last words he told her before he took his final breath, and Shiori would like to fulfill his wish, but no matter how hard she tries, she can't get herself to open up because she's worried that she might make people annoyed or angry or sad. Now that she thinks about it, she never even had a proper conversation with her dad, and she has no idea why he chose to make her his successor either. But that's precisely why she wants to improve herself to the point that she can laugh and talk without fear, and Jero can relate to that. But he does remind her that she is currently being hunted by an assassin, so she shouldn't be putting herself at risk so much. That said, if she is anywhere she wants to go, he's not going to stop her because it's his job to keep her safe, and that's what he's going to do. Meanwhile, up on a pole, we see Naruko spying on Gero and Shiori, and he reports to his boss that assassinating Shiori is going to be a lot harder than he thought because her bodyguard seems really skilled. Later on, we see Naruko on a roof with Shiori's aunt, Fuda, giving him a massage, and she's complaining about how long it is taking Naruko to get the job done even though she's paying him so much money. And if you're wondering why Fuda is giving Naruko a massage while also complaining about his performance, that's because his ability allows him to hypnotize people under certain conditions. And even though her bodyguards know that he did something to her, they know damn well that they aren't strong enough to stop Naruko. So they just let it happen, since Naruko still plans on fulfilling Fuda's request of killing Shiori. 3 days later, over on Shiori's end, Jero and Kinosaki have been attending classes with her to make sure she's safe, but Jero is really into it. Kinosaki reminds him that he's only undercover as a student here, so he doesn't actually need to pay attention in class, but Jero is actually having a lot of fun here. He never got to experience school in his childhood, so this is all new to him, and he wants to make the most out of it while he can. Meanwhile, Naruko is sitting on top of an adjacent building, meditating in the middle of the AC units without a shirt on, and after taking a really deep breath, he lets out a sound that begins to vibrate everything around him. The vibrations are so strong that even metal begins to crack, and a moment later, while Jero is still engrossed in the class, he suddenly loses his sense of balance and falls right onto the table. As the building begins to shake, he realizes that this must be a direct attack from the hired assassin, but he has no idea who it could be since no one in the room looks suspicious, so it must be someone outside who did it. He takes out a syringe in preparation for whatever attack the assassin has in mind, and a moment later, the roof of the room right above Shiori collapses, so Jero injects himself and leaps over the desk to get her to safety. Fortunately, by the end of it all, Shiori was able to make it out in one piece with no real injuries. But Jero is still trying to figure out what was used in the attack in the first place that knocked him out for a moment. This room is well ventilated, so it couldn't have been a simple gas attack, and considering the damage, the only other possibility is that this was a precise sound-based attack from a sound master. And likewise, Naruko, after seeing how well Jero handled the situation even though his sound waves should have destroyed his sense of balance, realizes that Jero must be a master as well. After getting Shiori out of the class, Jero sends a message to inform Mitsuhiko of what happened, and Kinosaki thinks that with the recent attack, it might be best for Shiori to cancel the upcoming camping trip she wanted to go on. But ultimately, the decision is up to Mitsuhiko, since he's the one who hired Jero. After getting home, Shiori asks her uncle if he thinks she should cancel the trip, but to her surprise, Mitsuhiko tells her that she can still go if she wants to. After all, there's no replacement for youthful experiences like these, and as long as Gero and Kinosaki are with her, then what's the worst that could happen? Shiori is really happy to hear that, so she gets packed to leave on the trip with the others, but as she walks out the front door, we get a look at Mitsuhiko's eyes, and it turns out that he was hypnotized by Naruko to trick Shiori into going on the trip to make her an easier target. Jero isn't really bothered by this trip since even if Shiori had stayed home, they wouldn't be able to guarantee her safety completely. The only way to make sure nothing happens to her is to deal with the threat directly, and that means taking out the Sound Master. But he has no idea who the Sound Master is or when he is going to strike, which makes things harder for him. On the bright side, he has managed to get a lot closer to Shiori, but he still freaks out when she falls asleep on his shoulder. Meanwhile, at the back of the bus, Naruko has all the girls in class hypnotized and fawning over him, and he has the biggest grin on his face because everything is going exactly as he planned. Once the group arrives at the camp, everyone begins chatting, and Jero gets to work handling all the cooking because Kinosaki told him that girls love a man who can cook. And sure enough, everyone really is impressed with Jero's skills, But while he's busy with the kebabs, Shiori tries to strike up a conversation by offering people some yakisoba she made, but no one is paying attention to her. Jiro is starting to feel bad for her, but Kinosaki reminds him that Shiori said she wanted to figure this stuff out on her own, so they should just leave her alone for a bit. Shiori starts trying to think of any possible way she could get people to pay attention to her, but she can't really come up with anything. So she decides to go with her backup plan and goes into her bag to pull out her cosplay outfit she packed specifically for emergencies like this. There's no way people will ignore her now, so while she's got their attention, she walks up to a table she set up earlier and begins performing a magic routine she practiced in advance, making her yakisoba appear out of thin air. And her classmates are now very interested in her food, so she tries to do it again, but this time she ends up messing up the trick, so the soba ends up falling on her head. On the bright side, it did get everyone to pay attention to her, so now her classmates at least know she exists. By the end of the day, Jiro and Kinosaki go up to Shiori and ask her where she learned such a cool magic trick, so she explains that her family's business deals in party apparel, so she just picked up a few tricks over the years. She's not good with words, but back at the drinking party, when she saw Jiro's party trick, she was really impressed, so she thought she'd give it a try as well, and she's glad it worked out, so she thanks Jiro for giving her the idea, and he gets all embarrassed because of it. Just then, the group leader speaks up and asks everyone if they have heard about the curse around here. Apparently, there used to be a village around these parts, and the villagers made offerings to their local deity right up until World War II. Basically, once every 2 years, whenever the crops failed, they would pick out the youngest child in the village and lock that child in the shrine over there where a monster would devour it. The villagers abandoned the custom after the war, but a bunch of natural disasters soon followed, and even though over 1,000 people used to live here, now it is completely deserted. And rumor has it that even now, the monster, Lord Chladni, is still waiting for his next offering. Shiori is absolutely terrified by this point, but the group leader just made the whole thing up as a scary story, so Jiro tells Shiori that she has nothing to worry about. Anyway, now that the group leader has sufficiently set the scary mood, he tells everyone that it's time for tonight's party's main event, the test of courage that runs through the village forest. And a bunch of the girls are hyped because they think this is a good opportunity to get close to Naruko, but now that they think about it, they haven't seen Naruko for a while now. As it turns out, while everyone else was busy enjoying the party, Naruko was busy setting up all sorts of traps out in the forest in preparation for his assassination plan, and once he is done, he smiles with satisfaction because nothing can stop him now. The test of courage was originally supposed to go all the way to the shrine, but the path is way too dangerous, so the class rep decides to have it end halfway through the forest at a landmark where people will be able to take pictures together to prove they did it. Everyone is excited for the event, and before it begins, Kinosaki tells Jiro this is his big chance to score some serious affection points with Shiori, so he goes along with it, and so far it has been going great. Shiori has been clinging onto Jiro for safety this entire time, and she apologizes to him for being such a burden, since she's sure Jiro's job would have been a lot easier if she just stayed home. However, Jiro tells her she doesn't need to worry about it because it doesn't really make a difference. At least out here, they more or less know where the assassin is going to strike, so it'll be easier for Jiro to counter him when he does attack. He tells her to just enjoy the trip as much as possible, because he will make sure nothing happens to her, and Shiori is happy to hear that. They eventually arrive at the photo stand, so Jiro takes out a selfie stick the class rep provided so they can pose together. However, he has never used one of these before, so Shiori offers to do it instead, and they take a nice picture together. However, when Shiori goes to check the picture she took, she sees a faceless blob in Jiro's place, and Jiro is nowhere to be found, so she starts running through the forest looking for him. She eventually does manage to track Jiro down, but unfortunately, that isn't actually Jiro, and whatever it is, it's coming after her now, so she needs to make a run for it. Shiori ends up running all the way up the mountain and into the shrine to get away from that thing, but even though she thought this was going to be a safe place at first, she soon realizes that there's a noose over there, and whatever was outside is no longer outside. It starts walking towards her, and Shiori is paralyzed with fear, so she can't bring herself to move, but then as the light shines on the figure, she realizes it's just her father, the same father who she saw die on his deathbed. That should have immediately tipped her off to the fact that this is a trick, but she's too rattled to think straight, so she fully believes this is her father. She asks him why he chose to make someone like her his successor, and that's when the mental horror starts, because the imposter starts yelling at her, saying that naming her as the successor was a mistake and she is too useless to fulfill such an important role. All this was done by Naruko to shatter Shiori's confidence and put her under his control, and once he hypnotizes her, he points her towards the noose and tells her it will be a lot easier if she just ends things now. Shiori begins walking up the steps, fully convinced on taking her own life just as Naruko had planned, but at the last second. She recalls how much fun she had earlier today and decides that her life really is worth something, after all. So she stops herself and runs to the other side of the shrine to get out. However, she failed to realize that there was nothing on that side of the door, so she goes plummeting off the side of the cliff, and a fall from this height would most certainly kill her. But for once, her overlapping thoughts come in handy because she remembers that she still has an umbrella on her and is able to use it too. Never mind, that didn't work. Fortunately, before she could hit the ground, Jiro showed up just in time to save her, and she is really relieved. Jiro explains to her that the assassin must be trying to make this look like self-inflicted harm so her relatives won't become suspects, because in that case, they'd lose access to the inheritance. That means everything up till now, including the legend of this village, was made up by Naruko just so he'd have an excuse for Shiori's death. Jiro tells Naruko that he's impressed with his capabilities because the second Shiori took that photo, she was hypnotized and ran off into the woods looking for Jiro even though he was standing right next to her. And while that was happening, Naruko hit Jiro with a shockwave to knock him down and mess up his sense of direction so he wouldn't be able to find her in time. However, Jiro tells him he's not going to let something like that happen again, and Naruko says he's looking forward to the challenge as he disappears back into the forest to set up his next attack. Jiro tells Shiori that it's too dangerous for them to hang around here, so they need to get moving, but Shiori is in no shape to run right now because her knees gave out from fear after that fall. In that case, Jiro tells her to climb on so he can carry her, but Shiori doesn't have much experience being carried either, so this is the best position she could think of. There's no time to change it, so Jiro injects himself and starts running. A few moments later, Naruko activates his ability, creating dense sound waves designed to manipulate the mind throughout the forest, all while he casually sits in a massage chair he brought with him. He is without a doubt impressed by what Jiro's poison boost ability is capable of, but he is certain that he will win this battle because his sound waves can reach anywhere on the mountain, so outrunning him is impossible. In an attempt to negate Naruko's mind manipulation, Jiro gives Shiori a pair of earplugs, but Shiori says she actually has something that'll work even better since she brought a pair of noise-canceling headphones with her. Naruko can tell what they were thinking, but he says it wasn't a smart move because now Jiro won't be able to hear his sound attacks coming anymore. However, even though Jiro can't hear anything, he is still able to dodge the sound waves by feeling the vibrations with his skin. This intrigues Naruko since he wasn't expecting Jiro to be capable of doing something like that, but it doesn't matter because those noise-canceling headphones are useless against Naruko's precise sound waves, so he easily gets past them and gets into Shiori's head to take control once more. All of a sudden, Shiori jumps off Jiro's body and bolts into the forest on her own. Naruko uses his powers to show her a vision of her uncle telling her that she was nothing but a burden and a waste of space to him, and that he'd be much happier if she just died already, but Jiro snaps her out of it and reminds Shiori that none of that is true. Her uncle interviewed tons of bodyguard candidates before he hired Jiro because he wanted to make sure that Shiori would be absolutely safe. The only reason he even decided to hire Jiro was because he saw a review from Himikawa talking about how he saved her life, and there's no way he would do all of that if he didn't care about Shiori's safety. Shiori realizes that Jiro is right and snaps out of Naruko's illusion, but to make sure something like that doesn't happen again, Jiro is forced to sedate Shiori for now. That puts a serious damper on Naruko's plans since he can't hypnotize Shiori if she's unconscious, but he still has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, so he's far from done. Naruko's brainwashing works by drawing out a person's traumatic memories and feelings and amplifying them to cloud the person's sense of reality. It's the same technique he used to convince her uncle to agree to this trip, and Shiori has a lot of insecurities that Naruko could take advantage of, but Jiro isn't going to let him get away with it. At the same time, Kinosaki is currently walking along the street, looking for Jiro and Shiori because they were supposed to be here by now, but all of a sudden, Jiro jumps out from some bushes with Shiori hanging onto him, and it takes a moment for Kinosaki to process what he's seeing because he did not expect their relationship to go that far so soon. After Jiro takes a moment to explain everything that happened, Kinosaki understands what's going on, and she asks Jiro if he's okay after all of that. He admits that he did push himself quite a bit, but he's mostly fine. But that's not what's important right now. Naruko is still going to be coming after Shiori, so Jiro asks Kinosaki to take Shiori and get her out of the village as soon as possible. Kinosaki initially agrees, but then she realizes that doing that would put her in serious danger. Jiro tells her not to worry because Naruko is likely going to target him first. After all, he has foiled Naruko's plans twice now, so he will no doubt try to get rid of Jiro before targeting Shiori again. Kinosaki reminds Jiro that she's only here as his marriage advisor, so she didn't sign up for any occupational hazards like this, but just this once, she's willing to go along with it. However, before Kinosaki and Shiori leave, Jiro asks her to wait because there's something he wants to check. He dismantles the headset that Shiori was wearing, and sure enough, he finds a transmitter inside, which was likely installed by Naruko to make it easier to brainwash her. There's still quite a lot that Jiro doesn't understand about Naruko's technique, but if he is trying to hide an attack from the shadows, then Jiro is just going to have to drag him out. He figures out that Naruko's sounds are being transmitted through the wires he set up throughout the forest, so he attempts to cut them all using his acid, but to his surprise, the acid bounces right off the wires. Naruko explains that the wires vibrate at extremely high frequencies, so no liquids are able to come into direct contact with them. And that's not all these strings can do, because using them at their full power, Naruko is able to create a giant vibrating mass of sound waves, and it looks like Jiro might be in a tough spot here. But all of a sudden, Naruko realizes that his puppet has stopped moving. This makes him panic a little, since he has no idea how Jiro stopped it, and he doesn't have a backup plan for that, so he runs out to go see what happened to his threads. But to his surprise, all his threads are still in perfect shape. Jiro just happened to inject the surrounding trees with a growth chemical he made, and all the new branches formed seem to have messed up the tension of Naruko's wires, making it impossible for him to accurately control the sounds anymore. However, even though Naruko may have lost his main way of beating Jiro, that doesn't mean he has lost yet because he still has a separate plan to take Shiori out, and it's already in motion as they speak because he has already taken advantage of the fear lying in the hearts of the others in class. And hearing that, Jiro realizes that Shiori and Kinosaki are probably in danger. Meanwhile, back at camp, Kinosaki and Shiori finally regroup with the others, but when they get there, they find everyone talking about how the road was mysteriously destroyed, so there's no way to get out now. And they also spot the giant puppet that Naruko made, and that, combined with Naruko's hypnosis, makes them believe that the curse of the village must be real. As such, in their state of hysteria, they decide that they need to leave an offering if they want to survive, and that means the youngest person here has to die, which just so happens to be Shiori, so all of her classmates begin chasing after her with murderous intent. Shiori and Kinosaki start running away, but Naruko says it's only a matter of time before the students catch and kill her. Jiro won't be able to stop them until he gets past Naruko, and just to be clear, Jiro may have stopped Naruko's giant puppet, but he never said that was his only means of fighting. He then begins vibrating his hand at super high speed before chopping a tree down and using the wood to make a violin with a few strands of his hair as strings, and with this, he is once again a threat because Jiro doesn't know what that violin does. However, as it turns out, that violin doesn't do shit, and he just made it to throw Jiro off, so Naruko chucks it at him and starts running away looking for something. As Naruko runs, he starts using his hypnotic sound waves on Jiro, trying to convince him that Shiori is better off dying here because her life is only going to get harder from here. He knows from experience that a weakling entering the world of the strong will only end in tragedy, so she'd be much happier if she just gave up on becoming the CEO so all this could end. However, after listening to all Naruko had to say, Jiro just asks him if he's scared that Shiori will prove his philosophy wrong. After all, he already used his ability on her to pull out her deepest, darkest traumas, yet she overcame them on her own. And that makes her a lot stronger than people like him or Jiro, who were basically forced to become strong by their families. Just then, Naruko finds what he has been looking for, so he bolts towards it at full speed. The item in question is a compound of Fight Inside, and it is a healing compound that trees release into the air. The Sound Master techniques aren't suited for hand-to-hand combat against someone like Jiro, so he needs to have his body in absolutely perfect condition to stand a chance. And that's where the Fight Inside comes in. All he needs to do now is inhale deeply, and he will be able to generate a sonic wave powerful enough to take Jiro out. However, just as Naruko finishes inhaling it all, his vision suddenly goes blurry, and that's when he realizes that Jiro must have released a poison gas into the Fight Inside to trick him into inhaling it. He thinks quickly and prepares to exhale all the poison gas in one go so it won't affect him, but he was already too late because Jiro caught up to him and shoved some water-absorbent polymer into Naruko's mouth, preventing him from exhaling the poison gas, and immediately afterwards, Jiro proceeds to punch Naruko in the gut, knocking him out. However, just because Naruko has been taken out doesn't mean the effects of his hypnosis simply go away, so he's sure the other students are still hunting Shiori down, trying to sacrifice her as they speak. Meanwhile, the students are indeed still looking for Shiori, but she managed to find a pretty good hiding spot behind a fallen log, so there's no way they're going to find her. The group eventually gives up on looking for her altogether and decides to just sacrifice the second youngest person in the class, who happens to be this girl. At the same time, Kinosaki has just found a path leading out of the village, so they should be able to make it out of here alive if they leave now, but Shiori says she actually plans to go back. Kinosaki tells her that's crazy because all those people were trying to kill her a moment ago, but Shiori says that if she doesn't go back, then they are just going to end up sacrificing one another, and doing something like that is bound to leave them scarred for life, so she wants to stop them before that happens, and she has an idea to do it. Meanwhile, back up the hill, the others are about to kill Asuwa to sacrifice her to the monster, but before they can bash her head in, Shiori suddenly shows herself and tells them to stop. The group is still hysterical, so they all start charging at her so they can use her as a sacrifice after all, but Shiori already prepared for something like this. So she performs a magic trick with the fire from her candle and convinces everyone that she is a witch with the power to exorcise the monster. This was all a carefully constructed act made with the help of some makeup and public speaking pointers from Kinosaki, and she's got the whole routine planned out. But just then, Asuwa, the one who was going to be sacrificed instead of Shiori, yells that Shiori is just putting on an act to keep herself from being sacrificed because if she could really get rid of the monster, then why didn't she do it earlier? Shiori stays calm and says she was just waiting for her power to build up so she could take the monster down, and that's good enough of an explanation for everyone there. So they all ask her to take the monster out right now, otherwise they'll have to sacrifice her after all. Internally, Shiori really wants to run away, but she knows that if she leaves, someone here is going to die, and Kinosaki reassures her that her plan is going to work, so she goes fully into character and uses a trick to launch a fireball at the monster. Now, Shiori's fireball isn't actually powerful enough to destroy that thing, but that doesn't matter because Kinosaki already told Jiro about the plan, so he is going to launch himself into the air and blow some flammable gas onto the monster so it really will catch fire. And with their combined effort, the giant is completely engulfed in flames, and the sight of it being destroyed snaps everyone back to their senses. They are now all left very confused and wondering what they were doing a moment ago. But Shiori interjects to keep them from remembering and tells them she'd like to move the campfire. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Naruko finally admits defeat to Jiro because he has nothing left in his bag of tricks, but Jiro tells him that the one he lost to is actually Shiori, because it was her, overcoming her weakness that led to his defeat. Hearing that, Naruko thinks back to his youth when his father forced him to fight his older brother to the death for no other reason than to weed out the weaker sibling. As such, Naruko was forced to kill his older brother against his will, and ever since then, to justify it to himself, he told himself that killing weaklings is a mercy to them. He sees Garo walking away, so he asks him if he's not going to finish him off already since he lost, but Garo says he has no intention of doing that. He understands that Naruko's training must have messed him up mentally, because he went through similar training when he was young, so he tells him that if he really wants to heal, then he should find someone he can talk to about his own weakness. Back at the camp, everyone has pretty much forgotten what happened and they are all having fun around the campfire, and when Shiori sees Jiro coming, she reaches into her bag to give him a present she picked up for him. It's a jumbo kit of the Mix Max candy Jiro loves so much, and Jiro damn near has a heart attack because this is the greatest present he has ever received. By the next morning, everyone wakes up thinking that everything that happened last night was a dream, and they all recall seeing Shiori as a witch or exorcist of some kind. But Shiori brushes it off as just their imagination. A few minutes later, Shiori's uncle shows up with a bunch of helicopters to get her and all her classmates, and once everyone is loaded up and on their way back home, Shiori thanks Jiro for everything he did because thanks to him, no one had to die, and none of her classmates had to feel guilty about what happened last night. Garo explains that all he did was dose them all with a little memory filter to make it seem like it was all a dream, so it's not that big of a deal, but Shiori still wants to thank Garo, so she raises her hand, trying to pat him on the head. Jiro instinctively pulls away because he's not used to having his head touched, and he asks Shiori what she thinks she's doing, so she explains that she wanted to try patting his head as a reward. Jiro seems like he's a little uncomfortable with the idea, but Kinosaki tells Shiori to go ahead and pat away because Jiro just needs to get used to compliments. Thus, Shiori pats Garo's head the entire way back home, and he just sits there with a mix of embarrassment and happiness from being thanked. Meanwhile, back in town, Shiori's aunt has just received a call from Naruko telling her that he won't be able to fulfill the contract as expected, so he will be refunding his fee to her. Shiori's aunt is infuriated when she finds out that Naruko failed his mission. She did hire a backup assassin for situations like this, but she has very little faith in him because he looks way too goofy to actually be good at his job. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Shiori and the others arrive at her aunt's building, and Jiro has absolutely no trouble knocking out the bootleg Deadshot. Shiori's aunt asks if they are here to take her life or if they are after her fortune, but Shiori says she's not here for either of those things. Instead, she wants to ask her aunt to train her. She says she is well aware of how much effort her aunt put into building the company alongside her dad, and she wants to live up to that legacy. Shiori's aunt doesn't understand why Shiori would be saying all this even after she sent an assassin to try and kill her, but Shiori says she understands why she did it because Shiori's aunt values the company more than life itself. Before Shiori's father died, he met with Shiori's aunt and said that he knows she may not agree with his decision to leave Shiori in charge of the company, but if Shiori managed to prove herself as a worthy successor, he asked that his sister do everything she could to look out for her. After recalling that memory and seeing Shiori's eager face, she realizes that she was wrong about her all along and agrees to work with her from now on. Shiori is really happy to hear that, so she turns to tell Jiro and Kinosaki the good news, but to her surprise, the two of them are already gone. At the same time, Jiro is currently carrying Kinosaki while sliding down the side of the building, and Kinosaki asks him if he's sure he wants to leave like that since he didn't even get Shiori's contact info yet. But Jiro says she's already got a lot on her plate with preparing to become the CEO, so she doesn't need the extra stress of marrying into a family like his. Kinosaki understands Jiro's point, but he still thinks it's a shame since he had a feeling that Jiro and Shiori would be a perfect match for each other. But hey, not every relationship is going to work out in the end. However, just as Kinosaki is getting ready to find Jiro his next match, Shiori rides over on a motorcycle looking for Jiro and asks him to wait because there's something she still wants to do with him. So she invites him and Kinosaki to have a drinking party with her. Later that night, they all gather in the park to drink together. Both Jiro and Shiori clearly want to talk to one another, but they absolutely suck at having a conversation, so they can barely get more than 2 words out at a time. Kinosaki decides to step in to carry the conversation before Jiro ruins his chances with Shiori, but just then, Jiro gets up and says he has a new magic trick he wants to show Shiori. Kinosaki doesn't think that's such a good idea since his last magic trick didn't go over so well, but Shiori really wants to see it, so Jiro prepares himself, and using sleight of hand, he makes a flower appear in his hand before. A moment later, dozens of flowers rain down from the sky, and these aren't just random flowers either, because he made sure that Kinosaki got one that matches his scarf, and that Shiori got her favorite flower. He used to think that party tricks were all about getting people's attention by any means necessary, but thanks to Shiori, he now understands that it's more about understanding your audience and making sure they leave happy and entertained. Shiori is moved by Jiro's words and says she also has a new trick she wants to show him. So the two of them spend the next few hours showing each other all the tricks they know, and it may not be a regular conversation, but they are communicating well enough now, so Kinosaki is satisfied. By the end of their little party, Shiori tells Jiro that she had a great time tonight, and Jiro doesn't really know what to say in response, so he just tells her to do her best at running her company. Shiori promises to give it her all, but there's actually one more thing she wanted to talk to him about. She says she doesn't want to neglect any part of her future, whether it be running the company, completing college, or falling in love. Hearing her say that leaves Jiro stunned because she's clearly talking about him, but before he can say anything, Shiori's uncle shows up to pick her up and interrupts them. Shiori then says goodbye to Jiro, but before she goes, she asks to add him to her friends list, and just like that, Jiro has finally made his third normal friend. After Shiori leaves, she starts freaking out because she is so happy that she actually managed to get Jiro's contact info, and Jiro is still in disbelief about the whole thing because he's not sure if she really likes him or if she was just being polite. Kinosaki is proud of Jiro's growth, and he starts getting ready to plan Jiro's next mission on Sunday, but Jiro tells him he's busy that day because he's got to attend his best friend's wedding. He explains that his friend, Toshiki, the bug master, just invited him to his wedding via butterfly message, and when Kinosaki sees a picture of him, he's a little freaked out since he thinks Toshiki looks scary, so he tells Jiro to have fun with the wedding and prepares to leave. However, Kinosaki soon receives a butterfly of his own, and it turns out that Jiro had already told Toshiki all about Kinosaki trying to help him find a wife, so he wants to invite Kinosaki to his wedding so he can express his sincere gratitude for helping his friend. Kinosaki is surprised because the bug master actually seems like a really nice guy, so maybe attending wouldn't be such a bad idea, and Jiro also isn't too good at social events like these, so he could use a little help picking out an outfit, at the very least. Thus, Kinosaki ends up accompanying Jiro to the wedding, and the place looks almost fairy tale-like with all the pretty bugs scampering around, which is surprising to him since it's way better than he expected. However, just then a man shows up behind the two of them, and without a word, he launches several needles right into Jiro's face, and the second those needles make contact, Jiro falls flat on the floor. Kinosaki starts panicking because he thinks Jiro was just assassinated right in front of him. But it turns out that it wasn't nearly as bad as he thought it was, because Jiro gets back up a moment later and hands the needle man a stack of cash. He explains that this man is one of his friends as well, Tsunaji, the needle master, and he was using acupuncture on Jiro to help relieve some of the stress that he has been building up over his recent adventures. Jiro thanks him for the help and pays him for the service. And now that Tsunaji has some extra cash to burn, he asks his kids if they want to go to the amusement park this weekend. The needle master is already married with 3 kids, and he had also heard about Kinosaki's position as Jiro's marriage advisor. So he tells him he understands how rough he must have it trying to teach Jiro about romance. A little while later, the event finally begins, and Toshiki comes flying in while holding his wife, Anna, with a pair of giant butterfly wings. And seeing Toshiki so happy reminds Jiro of how the two of them first met. Toshiki had tipped Jiro off about a child trafficking ring that was operating near him, and Jiro went to take it down, but as helpful as that tip was, at the time, Jiro had nothing to do with Toshiki, so he was suspicious that Toshiki might have some ulterior motive by trying to curry favor with his clan. However, Toshiki assures him that it's nothing like that, because all he wanted was to share a drink with Gero, and that was the first time anyone had ever taken an interest in him personally, so it meant a lot to Jiro. Back to the present. At the wedding reception, all the guests are watching a story about how Toshiki and Anna first met, and apparently it was when Toshiki went out of his way to save her from a hiking accident, which sounds exactly like something Toshiki would do. As the wedding ceremony progresses, the two exchange their vows and rings, and it's all very beautiful, but Jiro is starting to wonder if he will ever be able to pull off such a perfect wedding like this. Kinosaki assures him that he will do everything in his power to make sure things work out for him. Meanwhile, outside the venue, there is a man who is getting ready to do everything in his power to ruin Toshiki's big day, and Jiro can sense that something is wrong. So when he gets a message from one of Toshiki's spiders confirming his suspicions, he immediately gets up and runs outside. Kinosaki calls after him and asks where he's going because he's supposed to give a speech in a few minutes, but Jiro just asks him to cover for him since he's got something he needs to handle real quick. The spider's name is Julia, and it is one of Toshiki's most trusted bugs, so as soon as she realized something was wrong, she came to get Jiro so they can stop it before Toshiki's big day is ruined. The one behind the plot is a man named Yamada, and he basically hired a bunch of hitmen to just storm the event and kill as many people as possible. He doesn't really expect them to win, especially not with a bunch of masters in attendance, but the ruckus should be enough to ruin Toshiki's big day, so he tells them that they can run away once the masters start fighting back. As for him, he's going to try and blow up Toshiki's wife just to make sure this becomes the worst day of his life and he regrets what he did to him that day. However, while he is detailing his grand plan, he fails to notice that his men are getting taken down one after another around him, and by the time he turns around, the only one left standing is Gero. He realizes that he probably shouldn't have trusted regular mercenaries from the dark web with a job like this, but he's still got a backup plan ready, so he activates the set of incendiary bombs he laid out ahead of time and launches them right at Gero. He had originally planned to use this to take out as many fleeing wedding attendees as he could, but all that matters is that he gets a chance to pay the Bugmaster back for stealing the only spark of passion he had in his life. Yamada was originally a run-of-the-mill loser who didn't care about anything. Not his hygiene, not the risks of borrowing money from a gang, and not even when that gang came after his organs as payment for the loan he took. He was apparently sold off to a psycho who implanted 5 powerful bombs in his body, 1 in each arm and leg, and 1 in his head, telling him that the explosions were powerful enough to destroy his limbs entirely, as well as anyone else nearby. And although this was probably meant to be some kind of saw trap, Yamada actually loved the idea of being able to take someone else out while blowing his own body up. So as soon as he got the chance, he ran up on a random pair, and without a second's thought, he blew their heads off, along with his arms, and he was having the time of his life doing it. However, that all ended when he met the Bugmaster. He tried to blow him up as well, but the Bugmaster was too fast for him, so he ended up with no limbs left to fight back. Toshiki then leaned in close to him, and Yamada thought this was going to be the perfect opportunity to blow him up using the bomb in his head, but when he tried to activate the explosive, it didn't work because Toshiki had already removed it with the help of one of his bees. He had assumed that Yamada was only doing this because he was forced to, otherwise, his head would explode, so he figured taking out the bomb would solve the problem and allow him to go back to his normal life. However, since that day, Yamada has been holding a grudge against Toshiki for denying him the glorious death he wanted, which is why when he found out that he was getting married, Yamada decided to do everything in his power to ruin it for Toshiki. He is certain that there's no way Jiro could have survived a blast like that, so he prepares to continue his wedding-ruining plan. But it turns out that Julia had formed a protective web bubble around Jiro, and the entire time Yamada had been rambling on about why he hates Toshiki so much. He was busy answering a call from Kinosaki, giving her a rundown on what to say if he doesn't make it back in time for his speech. Meanwhile, back at the wedding, it's time for the speeches, so Kinosaki ends up having to step in for Jiro after all. She makes up an excuse and tells everyone that Gero's stage fright gave him an upset stomach, so he wasn't able to deliver the speech in person, but he did leave a letter for Kinosaki to read on his behalf. Meanwhile, Jiro is still outside, trying to stop Yamada. But Yamada isn't as easy to beat as he thought he would be. He has prosthetic limbs that carry quite the punch, which normally wouldn't be a problem for Jiro to handle, but he doesn't want to use his modified bloodline here, because someone like Yamada isn't worthy of it, so he is going to defeat him in base form. Meanwhile, inside, Kinosaki reads Gero's letter, thanking Toshiki for all his kindness towards him over the years, and congratulating him on his marriage. He is also looking for a wife right now, and the only reason he has been able to find the courage to try is thanks to everything he has learnt from Toshiki over the years. Back when they first met, Jiro was still nothing more than a prickly and insufferable ghost, and he still doesn't understand why Toshiki cared so much about him back then, but he is grateful for it all the same. Back in the present, Jiro is currently using Julia's webs to launch himself at Yamada, and at first it may look like he missed, but he actually wrapped a web around Yamada's leg before dragging him into a wall and launching him away from the wedding venue so he can't cause any harm. However, just then, the creepy doctor who modified Yamada's body in the first place calls him through the receiver in his prosthetics and tells him that he is going to release the limiter in Yamada's prosthetics to allow him to blow the entire venue sky high. And Yamada is delighted to hear that. So he immediately starts flying towards the venue, and he is too fast for Jiro to catch up to him in time, so this could be a real disaster. However, just as Yamada was closing in on the venue, he caught a glimpse of Toshiki smiling ear to ear, and in that moment, he realizes that he was never angry at Toshiki for ruining his death. He was just jealous that even though Toshiki lived on a much deeper level of the underworld than an assassin like him, he was still able to show kindness even to an enemy and build a happy life for himself, while the only thing Yamada ever did was accept things as they are. He realizes that this isn't something he really wants to do, so at the last second, he changes directions and flies straight into the sky before releasing all his explosive prosthetics at the same time to avoid destroying the venue. As a result, the rest of the wedding goes off without any issues, and during the after-party, Toshiki goes up to Kinosaki to thank him for helping Jiro with the speech earlier. Kinosaki says it's no big deal, but he's honestly surprised that Toshiki isn't at least a little upset at Jiro for bailing on the speech last minute, but Toshiki says that if anything, he should be the one thanking Jiro here. Him attending the wedding at all is already more than Toshiki could ever ask for considering the difference in the standings of their families. Kinosaki is a little confused when he hears that because he thought all masters were relatively equal, but that's far from the truth. Clans like the Bug Clan and the Needle Clan both started out with venomous insects and poison needles. As such, they are basically branch families of the Poison Clan, which puts them way down in the hierarchy. He explains that there are 5 great families at the top of the assassin world: the Jiro family, the Arima family, the Dog family, the Kirishima family, and the Nasuke family. All other assassin clans are either branches or offshoots from these 5 great families, and the difference in power is so great that if the Jiro family were to order him to kill himself, he would have no choice but to obey. When Toshiki first met Jiro, his father put great emphasis on the fact that he must not offend members of the main family in any way, because they wouldn't hesitate to eradicate him for even the smallest slip-up. Hearing his own father give him such a warning put a great fear in Toshiki's heart, but when he actually met Jiro, he couldn't help but get the feeling that he was just a normal kid who was put in the role of a terrifying monster. That's why Toshiki and Tsunaji are grateful to Kinosaki for taking the time to look after Jiro. They are sure it must be tough on him, but they ask that he continue helping Jiro, and Kinosaki tells them there's no need to worry because he's going to make sure he finds Jiro's ideal partner someday. Meanwhile, back in the city, in a parking garage, the Spearmaster has just been assassinated, and he was killed so quickly that his body barely had time to process what happened. This honestly left the assassin a little underwhelmed since he was expecting more of a challenge, and it looks like his next target is going to be Jiro. Next on Jiro's relationship training, Kinosaki takes him to an arcade on a practice date so he can get the hang of what it's like to hang out with someone, and he tells him that a great way to impress your date is to win them a prize from the claw machine. And to demonstrate, Kinosaki shows him how it's done by winning a plushie on the first try. But when it's Jiro's turn, he fails again and again and again, until he had eventually burnt through 10,000 yen just trying to beat the stupid game. And at that point, Kinosaki told him now might be a good time to call it quits for now because he's clearly having trouble with that machine. Jiro agrees with him on that, but then he spots a whack-a-mole machine nearby, and he figures that he'll actually be able to win this one, so he decides to try it out. Sure enough, Jiro's superior physical stats allow him to efficiently whack the moles so much that he earns the high score in no time. But while that was indeed very impressive, Kinosaki has a feeling that a display like that would probably terrify any women Jiro goes out with. The next item on the itinerary is the photo booth, but Jiro still doesn't know how to smile like a normal person, so he just kind of awkwardly stands there while Kinosaki does all the posing. While they take their pictures, Kinosaki asks Jiro if he has heard about the Hitman Hunter that popped up recently, and he says he has. The Hunter has apparently been targeting some pretty high-profile targets, and his most recent victims were Dan, the Dismemberer, and the Spearmaster. It isn't too surprising that Dan was defeated, but for that Hunter to have killed the Spearmaster, they must be incredibly powerful. So Kinosaki warns Jiro to be extra careful because they might come after him as well. Jiro understands, but as he and Kinosaki step out of the photo booth, he soon senses someone watching them nearby, so he puts his hand in front of Kinosaki as he comes face to face with this woman. She already knows who Jiro is, and she says she has something she'd like to talk to him about, but first, she asks him to take some photos with her because it looked like fun when he was doing it with Kinosaki. After the photos, they head to the cafeteria, and once there, the woman introduces herself as Kimi. She says she wants to hire Jiro as her bodyguard, so she has been looking for a chance to talk to him all day. Kinosaki understands all that, but she doesn't get why Kimi didn't just reach out to Jiro on DarkNav like his other clients do. Kimi tries to act all high and mighty and says Jiro should feel honored that someone as beautiful as her decided to meet him in person, but neither Kinosaki nor Jiro are willing to put up with this shit, so they start walking away. Kimi panics when they start walking away and apologizes for how she talks since it's just a force of habit. She explains that she is a master as well, and she is being targeted by that Hitman Hunter everyone is talking about, and she was worried Jiro might refuse if she sent a message online, so she wanted to ask for his protection in person. But her habit kicks in again, and she says Jiro should be glad he gets to protect a beauty like her. And again, Jiro and Kinosaki start walking away, so Kimi apologizes and begs them to stay. Kinosaki doesn't even understand why Kimi needs Jiro's help in the first place, since if she's a master, she should be able to protect herself. But Kimi explains that fighting isn't really her thing, and she seems pretty desperate, so Jiro agrees to at least hear her out. Kimi is genuinely shocked that Jiro is really considering helping her, but the way he sees it, if a master from a completely unrelated clan is asking him for help, then she must really be in a tight spot. This is the nicest anyone has ever treated Kimi, and it's such an overwhelming feeling that she nearly passes out from the shock, so Jiro rushes forward to catch her. And that just makes Kimi fall for him even harder, so after internally spiraling for a few minutes, Kimi eventually snaps out of it and hugs Jiro out of pure joy. And they think it's a little weird, but at least she's not a threat. Once they finally get Kimi to calm down, they ask her what type of master she is, and Kimi doesn't usually like revealing this, but since these are special circumstances, she agrees to show them. She then begins chittering, and a few seconds later, a little hamster comes out of hiding on the roof, and that's when Kimi explains that she is the hamster master and introduces them to her partner, Sirius. She explains that she works in tandem with Sirius to gather information, and as a matter of fact, it was Sirius that tracked Jiro, which is how Kimi knew to find him here. Kinosaki thinks the hamster is absolutely adorable, but carrying on with the conversation, Jiro asks if that means Kimi is related to the Beast Clan, because he recalls hearing that all masters of the Beast Clan are experts, just that they aren't necessarily good fighters. Technically, it's the same for him, since he's better at setting traps than he is at fighting, and Kinosaki is surprised to learn that fighting isn't actually Jiro's specialty even though he's so good at it. Personally, Kimi would prefer to have nothing to do with the Hitman Hunter, but the association she's a part of is all fired up and they are preparing to go take the guy down, which is a huge problem for her since they are going to drag her into it as well. If Kimi is really part of the Beast Clan, then Jiro asks why she doesn't just ask one of the other clan members for help, but she says there's no way they would help her. Up until a few generations ago, her family were rat masters, and they were pretty well respected within the clan. But as time went on, the bloodline thinned, and their power grew weaker. So now the clan barely spares Kimi a second thought. After all, while she is technically a master, she has never killed anyone, and she works a normal office job, so they just plan to use her as a meat shield when it's convenient for them. It sounds like Kimmy really is in trouble here, but all of a sudden, she apologizes to Gero for wasting his time and gets up and pays the tab. She feels a little calmer after talking about everything, and now she realizes that there's no way the future head of one of the 5 great families would agree to be her bodyguard, and even if he did, there's no way she could afford his massive fees, so she once again apologizes for wasting his time. She then begins walking away, having made peace with the fact that she is going to die soon, but just then, Gero tells her he's willing to take a payment of 10,000 yen a day for the job. Kimmy freezes in her tracks when she hears him say that because she can't believe it, and Kinosaki is just as surprised, so he asks Gero if he's sure about this, but Gero just wants to help Kimmy because she's in a real jam here. Kinosaki has no problems with the arrangement since this may not have been part of the plan, but it's a good opportunity for Gero to find another love interest. And Kimmy is so happy that she won't have to die anymore that she jumps on top of Gero to hug him. The next day, both Gero and Kinosaki meet up with Kimmy, and she tells them that she wants to introduce them to the rest of her association because they're going to have to deal with them at some point. Plus, she really wants to show off the fact that she's got Gero as her bodyguard now, but when they eventually arrive at Kimmy's association, they find everyone there already dead, with the only survivor being a man sitting over in the corner. Kinosaki assumes he must be a member of the association and asks what happened here, but Kimmy has never seen that guy before, and the second Gero realizes that, he tells them to run, but it's too late because Peachy has already run up to Gero and stabbed him. Gero managed to avoid a fatal injury by jumping back just in time, but he still got stabbed pretty badly, and this is the first time Kinosaki has ever seen Gero suffer a wound like that, so he is really worried here. Gero yells for Kinosaki and Kimmy to get out of here while they still can, and they can tell that he is serious, so they both take off running. Gero has managed to stop the bleeding from the stab wound, so he should be able to move a little better now, but he can tell that this guy is no joke. He asks Peachy why he's doing this, but Peachy doesn't answer him, and instead lunges forward to slash at Gero. Gero manages to jump out of the way and land on the edge of the railing, but Peachy's slash actually sliced the entire corner of the building off, so it comes sliding down, and Gero can't believe Peachy was able to do something like that with such a tiny knife. He jumps over to the next building to save himself, but Peachy does the same and catches up to him with no trouble at all, so Gero realizes there's no way he's making it out of this without using his modified bloodline. He takes out 2 syringes and injects himself with a vision-enhancing poison and a reflex-boosting poison so he can keep up with Peachy's speed better. And with the speed boost, he manages to evade one of Peachy's attacks and deliver a 15-hit combo before launching him off the roof. But to his dismay, Peachy seems completely unharmed, and in fact, as he is climbing back onto the roof, he is answering a phone call. The person on the other end is telling him that he made a mistake targeting Gero because he hasn't actually done anything evil. But Peachy doesn't seem so convinced because he saw Gero inject himself with 2 syringes, and what good guy does that sort of thing? He thinks Gero is probably just as bad as all the other masters, so he had better take him out now while he still has the chance. Gero tries to rush at Peachy while he's still distracted, but Peachy is way quicker than him and swings a signboard at Gero's body, which Gero narrowly manages to evade. No matter what Gero tries, he isn't able to keep up with the sheer power and speed of Peachy, and it's all he can manage to destroy the signboard with his acid, so Peachy can't use it as a weapon anymore. However, Peachy skillfully changes positions and drop kicks Gero into the floor before running off to go catch the sign pieces so none of the animals nearby are hurt. Gero is surprised to see that Peachy cares so much about animals, but Peachy doesn't have any particular fondness for them. They just didn't do anything wrong, so it wouldn't be right for him to let them get hurt. Gero once again asks Peachy why he is doing this and if he is from the Blade clan, but Peachy says he's just a regular guy. Gero doesn't believe him at first, since there's no way Peachy can do all this without being from some kind of special family, but Peachy says all his relatives are teachers, so he wouldn't say they are particularly special. If what Peachy is saying is really true, then Gero believes he must be a mutant. He already knows there's no way he can beat Peachy at his current strength level, so he decides to take a big risk and use a triple dose of poison to give him the boost he needs. However, that much of a dose was evidently too much for Gero's body to handle while injured, because he spurts out blood from all of his pores and collapses to the ground. It's pretty much over for him since he can't move a muscle anymore, and Peachy walks over to finish him off, so Gero accepts his fate and just asks Peachy to promise to leave the other 2 alone because they didn't do anything to deserve death. Peachy is a bit surprised since this is the first time a master has pleaded for someone else's life while at death's door, and a moment later, Kimmy comes running back trying to defend Gero as well. She has absolutely no fighting ability, so there's no way she could stop Peachy even if she tried. But the fact that she was willing to put her life at risk to save Jiro instead of running away and saving herself tells him that Jiro really isn't a bad guy after all, so he decides to not kill him after all. But it looks like someone has been watching the entire battle from a distance this whole time. A few minutes later, after getting Jiro a blood transfusion, his condition is stabilizing, so he asks Peachy why he is really doing all this. Peachy explains that his goal is to wipe out the Beast Clan, one of the 5 great families. He had heard that they were planning something that would kill a lot of innocent people, and he doesn't want to let that happen. If that's the case, then Kinosaki asks why he attacked people who weren't part of the Beast Clan, but Peachy says those guys just happened to be bad people who got in his way. Dan the Dismemberer often took pleasure in dismembering people for fun, and the Spear Master didn't care about getting civilians involved, so he would often end up killing tons of innocent people. Peachy's ultimate goal is to settle down with his girlfriend and open a cafe, so he just wants to make sure the city is safe by taking out all the dangerous people. Normally, Jiro would call Peachy insane for thinking he can take on the 5 great families, but after seeing what he's capable of, he wouldn't be surprised if Peachy actually pulled it off. Once Jiro has recovered enough, Peachy asks him if he has any information on the Beast Clan through his family, but Jiro explains that the 5 great families pretty much have nothing to do with each other, so he has no information on them. And neither does Kimmy, since she has never been allowed to go to the main house, so she has no connection to them. In fact, the only thing she's got from the main house is this collar that they make everyone from the Branch family wear, but all of a sudden, Kimmy feels a sharp pain coming from said collar and she passes out. Immediately after, a bat begins flying around, echoing the laughs of someone from the Beast Clan. The Beast Clan member had been watching the whole thing, and he explains that the collar around Kimmy's neck is a living accessory he just activated, which will suck her dry if they attempt to remove it by force, and unless it is deactivated, she will die in 3 days. And the voice tells them that if they want to save her, then they have to come to the Beast Clan's home turf, Dogo Animal Kingdom. A little while later, they all get on a boat headed to the island, and Jiro is a little surprised to find out that Kinosaki has a boat license, but he says it helped him out a lot with a bunch of the rich people he dated. He also has a ton of other qualifications in all sorts of fields, from IT to culinary arts, and Jiro is honestly surprised that he managed to learn all that stuff just to go on dates. For now, the snake around Kimmy's neck seems to have calmed down, so her life isn't in danger, but they still don't know how to get it off her neck. Because of that, Jiro plans to use a truth serum to force the Beast Masters to tell him how to save her. Kimmy feels terrible about dragging Jiro into this mess since the Beast Clan is definitely trying to lure him into a trap so they can take out the heir of one of the 5 great clans. But Jiro tells her he is doing this because he wants to. He says that if he failed to protect her at a time like this, he wouldn't be able to look at himself in the mirror anymore. Peachy also says he's fine with anything as long as he gets to clean up the Beast Clan, so she doesn't need to worry about him either. However, while Jiro and Peachy may have signed up for this, Kinosaki most certainly didn't, which is why Jiro tells him to wait offshore, since it would be too dangerous for him to go with them. Kinosaki understands and says he will have Jiro's next dating strategy ready by the time he gets back. Unfortunately, before Jiro and Peachy can even get off the boat, a giant squid emerges from the deep blue, shaking the vessel and knocking Kimmy overboard right before an eagle swoops in and flies away with her. Jiro realizes they were careless to think the Beast Clan members wouldn't try to attack them before they even reach the island, but right now, saving Kimmy is his top priority. He injects himself with a dose of poison and jumps off the boat, running across the water in pursuit of Kimmy as he races toward the shore. Meanwhile, Peachy stays behind on the boat to protect Kinosaki. He proceeds to look up a video on how to properly prepare calamari because he'd hate to waste all this squid meat. Step 1 says he needs to remove all the tentacles, so as the squid strikes at him, Peachy slices them all to bits. After that, he proceeds to cut the squid into countless calamari cubes, making sure to leave out the squid sac and entrails. Kinosaki is finally starting to understand what Jiro meant when he said that people who specialize in combat are a different breed. At the same time, Jiro has finally made it to land, and he comes face to face with the man controlling the eagle, Kota. Jiro can tell at a glance that Kota isn't a true beast master, so he assumes he must be from one of the Branch families. He asks Kota why he took Kimmy hostage and why they are trying to kill him and Peachy, but Kota has no idea because the higher-ups didn't tell him anything. They did, however, offer to pay him a few billion to take on this task, so he had no choice but to accept. Jiro can understand that, but he still doesn't get why Kota would target Kimmy instead of him. Personally, Kota wouldn't have wanted to do things this way either, but he was told to kidnap Kimmy to make it easier to take Jiro out. Jiro then asks him how to remove the snake choker, but Kota has no idea how to do that, and even attempting to research it would get him in trouble. Anyway, it's time for him to get to work. He summons a swarm of seagulls to block Jiro's vision, and while Jiro is distracted, he swings a bat right at his stomach. Jiro is actually caught off guard by how fast Kota is and how hard his bat hits, so beating him isn't going to be as easy as he initially thought. Kota would have preferred to avoid getting on the bad side of the Poison Clan like this, but all that money was too much for him to pass up. And while the Poison Clan may be one of the best at killing, they rank much lower when it comes to head-to-head battles, so Kota is convinced he has a good shot at winning this fight. Meanwhile, the king of the Beast Clan, Dogo, is watching the whole battle unfold from his fish egg monitors, and he can't wait to see what trick Jiro uses to get out of this because he already knows Kota stands no chance against him. The Poison Clan excels when it comes to setting traps and playing unfair, so it's obvious that Jiro must have something up his sleeve, and the anticipation is killing Dogo. Kota is winding up for a game-ending strike, but Jiro sees it coming, and there's no way he's going to let him land something like that, so he takes out a smoke grenade and tosses it to the ground. The immediate area is quickly filled with dense pink smoke, and Kota thinks it must be poison gas, so he covers his nose to avoid breathing it in. He assumes Garo must have done this to buy time to set up a trap, but Kota refuses to let Garo get the chance, so he instructs his birds to blow the smoke away. However, before Kota can even realize what is going on, he gets punched square in the face and knocked to the ground. Dogo expected something like this to happen because, while Kota may be the fastest guy around, that speed doesn't mean much when you're up against someone who fights dirty. The reason the Poison Clan's traps are so effective is that they catch people off guard, and from the start, Jiro had planned to use the colored smoke as a distraction to scare Kota enough to make him lower his guard, after which taking him out was easy. Jiro finds Kota lying on the ground nearby, and he says he has a few questions for him, but Kota cuts him off and tells Jiro that if he's looking for the castle, then he just needs to head to the top of the mountain. Garo is surprised by how cooperative Kota is being, but Kota holds no grudge against Garo. He has already lost, so he sees no reason to hide any information from him. He also mentions that there genuinely isn't a way to get rid of the collars because it has never been done before, but he has heard a rumor about a possible removal method hidden in a belfry. Before he can say anything more, his collar begins to tighten as Dogo radios in through it. He introduces himself as the king of the island, and while he has Jiro here, there's something he wants to ask him. He has been hearing a lot of rumors lately that Jiro has been taking on bodyguard jobs for next to no money, and he can't figure out for the life of him why a poison master would do that. Jiro answers honestly and says he's trying to get married, so he is helping people as a way to meet women, and Dogo finds that absolutely hilarious. He had been racking his brain trying to figure out why Jiro would risk his life for such a seemingly useless master as Kimi, but now it all makes sense, because Jiro must be considering her as a future bride. However, Dogo tells Jiro that he should probably reconsider because the bloodline of the Poison Clan has been refined over centuries to be one of the strongest among the ability clans, so adding someone like Kimi to the family would only weaken the bloodline. However, Jiro hates the way Dogo is talking about Kimi as though she's nothing more than trash. Meanwhile, out at sea, Kinosaki and Peachy are still on the boat when Peachy suddenly notices a little squid pop out of the water, and he knows that can't be good. So he grabs Kinosaki to protect her moments before the squid explodes. At the same time, back on Jiro's end, Kota suddenly gets a new burst of energy and turns a bunch of birds into spears before launching them at Jiro. Jiro is caught off guard by this since that was definitely one of the Spear Master's techniques, so he doesn't understand how Kota was able to use it. But this is all part of Dogo's experiment to fuse different bloodlines into one. Right now, blood from the Spear Master lineage, imbued with centuries of accumulated spear techniques, has been injected into Kota, allowing him to use techniques that only a true Spear Master should be capable of performing. Combined with his bird technique, Kota is now stronger than ever before. Jiro assumes this must have something to do with the evil plan Peachy was trying to stop, but right now, he doesn't have time to think about that because he needs to focus on staying alive. Dogo is certain that no amount of traps or tricks will be enough to get Jiro out of this predicament, so he calls his maid over to watch Jiro's downfall with him. Then he realizes Byako isn't here because he already sent her out to go get the other two. Meanwhile, on the other side of the island, Kinosaki and Peachy have just washed ashore, and it looks like Peachy took the brunt of the blast while he was protecting Kinosaki, so he's out cold. For now, Kinosaki wants to get Peachy somewhere safe so he can recover, but just then, he spots a large white bear staring him down. The bear raises its claw, and it looks like it's preparing to slash at him. But it turns out that the bear just really loves kung fu fighting and wants to be fast as lightning. Kinosaki tells the bear its martial arts are amazing, and then he tries to slowly shuffle away, but it obviously isn't going to be that simple. Back over on Jiro's end, he is still getting knocked around by Kota, and Kota is about to land a finishing blow, but Jiro remains standing perfectly still. Just before Kota can hit him with the bird bat, the birds all suddenly go limp. It turns out Jiro had mixed a muscle relaxant into his blood earlier, and though he's immune to it so it has no effect on him, Kota and his birds are not, so the birds end up passing out one after another, and Jiro slams Kota's face into the ground to knock him out. A little while later, Jiro manages to wake Kimi up, and he also treats Kota's wounds as well, so he wakes up not long after. Kota doesn't understand why Jiro would help him after he tried to kill him, but Jiro understands that Kota isn't necessarily a bad guy. He's just a baseball bird nut who lost his freedom to the Beast Master and had to follow his orders. All Kota wanted was to play some bird ball with his team and maybe make it a national sensation, but he struck out big time against Jiro. He admits defeat for now, and he swears that he won't lose the next time they face each other. But unfortunately, Doggo says there won't be a next time for him. Combining Kota's blood with that of the Spear Master did indeed grant him increased power, but there's a major drawback to such techniques because the blood of two different masters in one body causes a violent reaction, with the body rejecting the foreign blood, leading to unavoidable death. Doggo knew this would happen, but he didn't care because to him, Kota was just a disposable pawn, and now this is the end of the road for him. Meanwhile, Kinosaki has been running away from the bear in the forest, but it has finally caught up to him, and he doesn't know what to do. Fortunately, Peachy wakes up just in time to defend him by splashing the bear with his knife. However, just then, he notices a leech on his neck, and before he gets a chance to take it off, the bear suddenly snatches it off and runs away. It is later revealed that the bear was actually Doggo's maid, Bayako, in disguise, and she did all this just so she could retrieve some of Peachy's blood as Doggo instructed. With this combined with the blood Peachy managed to gather during Jiro's battle against Kota, Doggo finally has everything he needs to enact his master plan. As stated earlier, the problem with combining blood from different bloodlines is the fact that they will reject each other. But the blood of the Poison Master has been trained to not reject all sorts of toxins, so it shouldn't have that problem. And while Peachy may not have a bloodline, his blood still boosts strength and thinking speed by an inhuman amount, so combining both will give Doggo the ultimate weapon. Meanwhile, Jiro and Kimi are currently camping out in a cave. Jiro wants to get back out there as soon as possible, but Kimi stops him because she knows he is nowhere near back to full strength after the beating he took earlier. Jiro still tries to insist that he should get back to work, but Kimi pulls him down into her lap and asks him to at least let her take care of him because she wants to feel useful, even if only a little bit. She is the only Beast Master who has never been contracted to kill before, and she never really cared much about being weak before, but now all she can do is hide and watch as her friend gets hurt trying to protect her, and she hates the fact that she is so utterly useless. Jiro can see the pain in Kimi's eyes, and he had originally just wanted to save her without caring about what she could do, but now he has changed his mind. So he tells her that the two of them are going to defeat the Beast Master, and he is going to need her help to do it.